corduroy breeches on to work upon the railway. I was wearing corduroy breeches, digging ditches, dodging hedges, pulling switches, working on the railway. In 1842, from Hartlepool, I moved the crew and found myself a job to do, working on the railway. I was wearing corduroy breeches, digging ditches, dodging hedges, pulling switches, working on the railway. In 1846, I changed my trade to carrying bricks, but working on the railway. I was wearing corduroy breeches, digging ditches, dodging hedges, pulling switches, working on the railway. In 1847, poor Paddy was thinking of going to heaven. Poor Paddy was thinking of going to heaven and working on the railway. I was wearing corduroy breeches, digging ditches, dodging hedges, pulling switches, working on the railway. Yes, I was wearing corduroy breeches, digging ditches, dodging hedges, pulling switches, working on the railway.
Oh! You frightened the life out of me. I thought it was a foreman. What am I talking about? No, this is a smoke box, you see, and when I used to work on the railway, we used to kip in these. He could never find us. Now, the song we've just sang, the boys and myself, was an old railway song. Of course, we've jazzed it up a bit from the way they used to sing it, but it's more or less the same idea. Now, we're filming in the Museum of British Transport at Clapham in London. It's a wonderful place, and it's packed solid with old steam engines and trams and coaches and everything. Anything to do with transport for the last 200 years. If you really look around this museum, you can find out the whole history of railways, even back to the time when there weren't any. Look at this. This is England 150 years ago. Travelling was a bit on the dodgy side, as you can see. You never know. Any minute a highwayman would come out and stick you up. Money all your life, mate. And the roads, well, they were like cart tracks. Often you were lucky if you got there at all. Heavy goods, like rice pudding, coal, had to be carried in wagons running on rails. Now, these were pulled by horses, but new machines were soon going to change all that. And by 1809, someone had managed to build a steam engine on wheels. This was called the Catch Me Who Can, and it ran in London, round and round a track. But it only pulled a single carriage, and it was more like a toy than an engine. But people didn't really understand just what an important toy this was, and it was nearly 17 years before the opening of the first proper railway. This ran between Stockton and Darlington in Durham, and people came from miles around just to see it. A steam locomotive pulled a whole train of 32 wagons at a speed of 12 miles an hour. There weren't really enough carriages at first, so people had to sit up on the coal. A mining engineer, George Stephenson, built this railway, and being a go-ahead sort of bloke, he was soon planning another one between Liverpool and Manchester. To find the best locomotive for the job, they held a competition. Some designers offered very funny entries. But they didn't stand a chance because, as you've probably guessed, the winner was the famous rocket built by Robert Stephenson. That's George's son. He was a go-ahead bloke and all. All the locomotives in the competition were put on trial, and the rocket astonished everybody by running at a really amazing speed of 32 miles an hour. When the railway was finished, they had an opening ceremony with the Duke of Wellington riding on the first train. He wouldn't ride up on the coal. The railway age got off to a flying start. Train travel was a thing of the future, and everybody just had to get used to it, including the horses. Then the activity started. Thousands of workmen were building railway lines, tunnels and bridges. And as they worked, they made up railway songs. Something like this. In 1841, my corduroy breeches I put on. I put my corduroy breeches on to work upon the railway.
I was wearing corduroy breeches, digging ditches, dodging hitches, pulling switches, working on the railway. In 1842 from Hartlepool I moved to Crewe, found myself a job to do, working on the railway. I was wearing corduroy breeches, digging ditches, dodging hitches, pulling switches, working on the railway.
It wasn't only railways that were changing people's lives. Thousands left their homes in a nice quiet country to find work in the huge workshops and factories. And great smoking cities got dirtier and more overcrowded. On the train, some passengers had to travel in open wagons, just like the coal trucks on the first railway. It was a bit better if you could afford a bit more. At least you got a roof over your head. But even the first class was cramped, especially as the ladies wore big skirts and the men wore top hats. Even the signalman wore his top hat. When Queen Victoria and her family and guests went by train, they had a royal coach, all their very own. In 1851, there was a great exhibition in London. It was held in a wonderful building in Hyde Park, all made of glass and held up with iron girders. The Crystal Palace. On view were all the latest designs and the newest inventions. They even showed railway carriages and engines. This is one of them, the Lord of the Isles. It sounds Scottish, doesn't it? But really it was built for the Great Western Railway to run from their beautiful new glass and iron station at Paddington in London to Bristol. That's in the west of England. The designer of the station and of the railway also built a great steamship, the biggest in the world. It was called the Great Eastern. There's the designer in the middle. What a name, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. This ship had big paddle wheels driven by powerful steam engines, but just in case something went wrong, it had sails as well. Inside it was like a big Victorian hotel floating on the Atlantic Ocean. And people thought it was too big to be affected by a storm. But oh boy, were they wrong. On dry land, railways began getting more comfortable, and there were lovely new Pullman coaches where you could eat your dinner or even have a kip while you travelled if you wanted to. And trains were faster as well, because signals were faster. You see, the electric telegraph had been invented. No more men with flags and top hats. Electricity was speeding everything up. By now, there had been another wonderful invention, moving pictures. This film was taken at Hyde Park Corner in London in 1899. As you can see, horses were still pulling wagons and carts, buses and hansom cabs, and of course, wait for it, fire engines too. Here, I'm glad my house ain't alight. They'd never get there in that. Trains were always great fun to film, and to sing about as well. Especially in the old music hall songs.
Oh, Mr. Porter, what shall I do? I wanted to go to Birmingham and they sent me off to Crewe. Take me back to London as quickly as you can. Oh, Mr. Porter, what a silly boy I am. Take me back to London as quickly as you can. Oh, Mr. Porter, what a silly boy I am.
If you didn't go by a train, there was the new horseless carriage. Everybody made fun of the first cars. But in America, the Wright brothers had built what they called the heavier-than-air machine, and they made the very first flight. You see, times were changing fast, and in London streets, motor cars and taxis were soon dodging all round the horse-drawn buses. Then in 1914 came the First World War. Men went off to fight, but the people left behind had to manage somehow, and the railways, well, they had to be kept running. One big change after the war was that many more electric trains began running on local lines. But for the big express trains, steam engines were still the best. The Cheltenham Flyer. On its engine, it carried the words, "The world's fastest train." The railway companies in different parts of Britain all tried to have the best service and the fastest trains. In some luxury expresses, there was even a barber shop. Here, watch it, mate. You'll cut his fruit. Then something new appeared. It looked a bit like a spaceship that had wandered on a local railway line. But in fact, it was a strong hint of what was coming. A diesel rail car. However, it was a beautiful new streamliners that got all the attention. In 1935, to mark the Jubilee of King George V, a new train, the Silver Jubilee Express, flashed along at 112 miles an hour. How about that? And the coronation of King George VI brought in another terrific streamliner, the Coronation Scot. The drivers of these crack expresses were all doing their nuts to break records for speeds and timekeeping. Then in 1939 came the Second World War. Some people never learn. Railway stations, like everywhere else, took a terrific pasting from the bombs. In Paddington, under the shattered glass and iron roof, workmen were repairing the lines and clearing up the damage of last night's bombing. The trains had to be kept running all the time, of course. After the war, the railways began to have a new look and a new noise. The diesel was taking over. There's one, hidden in all that steam. Can you see it? Soon you'll be seeing a lot more, because only diesels and electric locos are being built now in railway workshops. And one by one, all the old steam engines are going to the graveyard. It's a bit sad, really. But cheer up, because these fast diesels and electrics are taking over. And you know what I always say, don't you?
travelling on the railway. As the train rushes down the line, you can't beat the sound of the engine. It beats a steady time. You can keep your bikes, you can keep your cars, or rockets that take you up to Mars. Oh, you can't beat travelling on the railway. Oh, you can't beat the good old train ride. You can't beat the life on the railway. It keeps you fit and strong. You meet all sorts on the railway, and if you smile, you can't go wrong. You can keep your jets and your aeroplanes. When it comes to travel, I'll stick to me trains, 'cause you can't beat the sound of the engine. Oh, you can't beat the good old train, yeah, yeah. You keep your bikes, you can keep your cars, or rockets that take you up to Mars.